don't need, I'm not saying we should not provide standard infrastructure, but people can learn with or without standardized international infrastructure, or whatever you want to call it. People can learn. So if you build the foundation, counting, kids can learn to count. Many kids finish primary 6, they can't write their names. How? So investment is gone down the drain because it costs government a lot to keep education free.
Is governance rocket science, as many are wont to say? Beyond the din and the inevitable noise of the politics, what are the big issues confronting us collectively today as Nigerians? Introducing the Big Issue Show. This is the show where we analyze big-ticket governance matters that affect all and sundry across the 36 states of the Federation and, of course, the FCT. Join me on all Mswitch media platforms on YouTube, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Hello and welcome to yet another edition of The Big Issue. This is the show where we examine big-ticket governance matters that affect all and sundry across the 36 states of the Federation and, of course, the FCT. My name is Buchi Onyebule and I'm very, very glad to welcome you to today's edition. Today, we will begin a two-part series on basic education in Nigeria, but we will pick something that perhaps should be a much bigger issue than it is currently seen as, and that is Nigeria's out-of-school children's situation. We will examine what the situation is now, how we got here, and perhaps if there are any ways out of what is actually a really big time bomb for us as a nation and as a people. All of this and more when we come back. Welcome back to The Big Issue. My friend and guest today, Rotimi Olawole. Rotimi is the Executive Director of Youth Hub Africa. Welcome, Rotimi.
Thank you very much for having me, Buchi. It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. Your organization has been focusing largely on education around the continent, so to speak, because I know that you've expanded your operations into East Africa recently, not just in Nigeria.
Yes, exactly. Education is one of the big themes that we focus on, especially doing advocacy around basic education, also deep diving into girls' education and ensuring that girls have access to school and that they are learning when they finish school.
I like this part, about having access to school and then learning when they finish school. But the learning part we're going to focus on the next, the part 2 of this particular deep dive. Let's first talk about access to schools and being present in the first place inside the school. Depending on what number you find more important, Nigeria has a very large chunk. In fact, Nigeria has the most out-of-school children in the world. The Nigerian government says we currently have 6.9 million kids who are out of school, and that's for kids from aged 6 to 11. Now, this number has changed in over the past few years. In the survey that ended in 2015, was published, I think, in 2018, the number was 13.8 million. Came down to a few years ago, it was 10 million. Now, we hear that it's 6.9 million. There's been some reactions around this particular number, considering that UNESCO gave a number of 20 million last year. Although the age range for that one is 6 to 18, which might explain a bit of the discrepancy. Although it's still pretty sharp, isn't it?
Yes, it is. My first hesitation is I very strongly doubt that the out-of-school children in Nigeria is reducing. My guesstimate would be that it's either remains stagnant or actually also showing an upward trend. Although I know the numbers are different, the age range is different, I would lean towards the UNESCO definition more comfortably, about 20 million as against Nigeria's 6.9 million. I think I'll be more comfortable with the UNESCO based on realities that I've seen and trends that I've witnessed and some of the things we're seeing in the Nigerian society today.
Right, so the Nigerian government got pushback last year when they tried to counter UNESCO's figures by saying, no, we do not have 20 million. They have a different measuring profile. We have ours, and we say 6.9 million. And one of the reasons that they put forward was to say, well, listen, security is improved in places like Borno, in Adamawa, in Bauchi, so to speak. And these were states that formed the bulk of, or gave really large numbers in the first of the reports that we got, and that was done, the survey that was done between 2010 and 2015. And so it seemed like there was validity to the argument. But in other parts of the country, still remaining in the north, in places like Zamfara, in places like Sokoto, in places like Niger State, we've seen an increase in insecurity there, and people have been, well, out of school. We've seen kidnap of school students as well. So it seems like while they might be accurate in some states, there are other problems in some other states that they may not have taken into account.
I think the first thing to do is to unpack and say Nigeria's out of school situation started even before we had insecurity challenges. So yes, while insecurity has played perhaps a significant part in the increase in that number, it's not the only factor. We have several of other factors. If you lay the data on out of school children and you lay that data on the poverty rates in Nigeria, and you lay that data on the unemployment rate in Nigeria, you begin to see that there are similarities and connections between these data sets. You will find that states with the highest poverty rate many times are also the states with the highest number of out-of-school children, and many times they are also the states with the highest numbers of unemployed, give or take a few of the states that are outliers. So there are many things that tells us that, and poverty rate is not reducing, right? So when I tell people that out of school, government has made bold declarations, free basic education. What does that mean? You know, and those of us who work in the education sector are saying that although education politically is said to be free, parents still have to cough out what we refer to as eating fees. So if you go to the bottom of the ladder, the bottom chain, you say school is free, a child arrives at school, first day, you have to buy uniforms. In many public schools, you need to bring your desk and chair, which you have to pay for. Buy uniform. In many public schools, they ask you to bring cutlass for agriculture, bring brooms to sweep the classes. And by the time they give you a list of the things you need to bring as a new student, by the time you calculate and convert it into value, into monetary terms, it's a lot. Parents can't afford it. Many schools pay exam fees because the schools don't get a subvention to print exam questions. So what do you want the principal of the school to do? They have to charge something.
Or the schools say they don't get the subvention.
I know many schools, I speak to principals, I've visited many schools across Nigeria. My mom retired as a principal, so I know the inner workings of the school. Actually, in fact, in public schools across Nigeria, there's practically nothing for the principals to steal. There's no money, right? There's really nothing, right? Many schools, the principals don't buy chalk. Chalk is supplied by state government, so they just receive. The principals are not responsible for procuring tables and chairs. A contractor shows up, I've been directed by Ministry of Education to supply 200 chairs, they just receive. There's practically nothing. Many schools across Nigeria are not even connected to electricity. There's nothing, really nothing. Barely nothing. Many principals don't have an office. They convert one unused classroom to their offices. There's really nothing for them to take. They have to work with the Parent Teachers Association to say, you know what, we are short of teachers. If we want pupils to learn, we need to hire more teachers. So they do the math, the Parent Teachers Association determine, they cut it, and they do the math. If we have 5 teachers and we pay them 20,000, that's 100,000. How many students we have? Let each child pupil bring 500 naira. That's an additional cost. Some parents can't afford it, you know. If you don't afford, you don't pay, that means the teacher don't get paid. So in order for school to enforce the payment, they say if you don't pay, don't come to school. If the parents don't have it, you sit at home. You know, so those are.
And then you join the out-of-school population.
Then you join the out-of-school population. So by the time, in some states, we ran a survey. In some states, the eating fees, out-of-pocket fees that parents have to pay in a term, 11,000, 13,000, 14,000. We ran a survey about 4 years ago. It's as high as that. And so if you make a political statement and say education is free, and it's not really free, irrespective of whether security has improved or not, and poverty rate in your state, people who lived on less than $1 a day is 50%, the numbers can increase. That's why I'm very, very hesitant to accept the federal government number. And what we have said in the sector is show the maths. Break it down by local government, by ward, by school, break it and show where are the improvements. So that people can interrogate this data. I can say, no, I know this school. I can go there and do head counts by myself. They don't have 1,000 students. Oh yes, we have seen it. We want to see the math. It helps researchers, it helps advocates, it helps us to be able to engage with the data. It also helps policy analysts, policymakers, even at government level, at state and local government, to use that data for better planning.
I'm inclined to agree with you, because when you say that poverty contributes to the out-of-school children's situation, if your poverty rate is increasing, then how are you getting more students enrolled into the school? Because if they're not able to afford it, how are they getting into school? That's a really valid question, isn't it? But then what are the other possible causes of, I mean, beyond security? What are other reasons that that you have seen in your work that make students or pupils in this case, to not be in school?
I mean, there are a number of factors, and I must say that government in the last 4 or 5 years, or perhaps longer, has tried a number of things. One is providing free meals in school. People have complained about the quality of meals, but in states where poverty is very high, if you provide meals, people are going to go to school. As much people that can afford to go will go to school. If I push my ward to school, if they get a meal a day, they're fine. But there are a number of other factors. There are cultural factors. People have 4 children. They need to take a decision. I'm going to farm every day. I need I need manual labor on my farm. So you have to take a decision. Is it profitable to send my kids to school or to come to farm with me to work? Which one is more profitable for the family? And one of the things that will make them take that decision is, what are they learning in school? If I have a perception that my kids come back today, how many subjects did you do today? 2 out of 9, 3 out of 9. What happened? Teachers are not showing up in class. Teacher didn't come. We didn't have teacher for this subject. Why is that so? Teachers have not been paid for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months. Like I said, my mom was a principal. She would say to me, when my teachers have not been paid for months, it's very hard for me to enforce that they show up in school. Because they say, I can't feed my family today. I need to go to the farm to work in order to feed my family. Can I pay for them to feed their family? I can't. So how do you want me to hold them accountable to show up in a place of work that is owing them 4 months, 5 months, 6 months of pay? It's hard. So those are the dynamics. So if you layer all of these data sets together, state government owe teachers. Poverty is high. Unemployment is high. If you do only control for things like school feeding, you get a small upward tick. Pupils are not learning anything in school, and that's why you see all kinds of mushroom private schools. Now we have pay-as-you-go schools where you pay 100 naira a day. So when you come, yes, we've seen that model is growing across Nigeria in rural communities.
So you pay on a daily basis?
On a daily basis. The day you don't have money, don't come to school, because many of their parents are blue-collared workers who go do plumbing, bricklaying work. They're paid on a daily basis. So when they get paid the previous day, they give 100 naira to their ward, who resumes in school. The day they're not paid, the kids sit at home. That's the model of some of the private schools we're seeing in local communities.
So how is that model reflected in the sort of the calculation?
That's what I'm saying to you, that those are the elements that we need to look at. I think that we're not very granular with the data coming from. And I always say to government in Nigeria all the time, if you hide the true state of things, I'm not saying they're hiding, but I'm saying if you hide the true state of things, then it's difficult for government at all levels to plan to correct the errors. If you say, oh, this problem used to be big, now it's no longer a big problem. Then if you go to the meeting to decide budgeting for education, for instance, they're deciding on, because Nigeria has a lot of competing needs, and you say, oh, I want this large share, they say, hey, your data shows us that it's no longer as big of a problem, so we should not allocate this much resources to education anymore. That's what you will find, because power sector has a huge challenge in Nigeria. Insecurity has a huge challenge. Education, unemployment, manufacturing. So if your data is telling me that you're making some improvement, let's take some of the resources and use somewhere else where we have huge challenges. So that's why it's important that we know the true state of things in education in Nigeria. I'm very suspicious of government numbers. I have not seen the math. I want them to publish the math. They should provide real data, CSV data that people can put into modeling and tell you, nah, statistical error, these things can't work, these numbers are not true, or yes, these numbers are true, we're seeing improvement here, we need to find improvements in other areas.
So let's go to another data subset that you're a bit more comfortable with. That is the UNESCO one that says we have 20 million. Now, of this 20 million, 33% of this is from the Northeast, which is the highest proportion. Followed, of course, by the North Central, which is one thing I find interesting, and I'll come to you with it. The Northwest has 25%, close to the North Central, but just a bit smaller. South to 24, Southwest to 22, and Southeast with 19. Aside the Northeast, which is like the discrepancy is really high. The rest of it is a bit close, which shows you that it's across the country. But I'm curious as to other causative factors that might not be financial or from the government. When I say from the government, I don't mean like security or infrastructure. That might be cultural. Are there any cultural reasons that you've seen that in your work that has contributed to some regions being the hotspots for these high numbers?
First and foremost, I wanted to link this question back to the original question, and that's why I say if you look at the UNESCO data, it shows there's a huge problem in the Northeast. If you look at government data, government is saying we made improvements in the Northeast. That's why I said we need to interrogate this data some more. I don't believe so. My friends in Borno would tell me till today, although I must admit rate of insecurity has gone down, that's very clear and obvious, but it still remains very difficult to operate in several local governments in Borno. People don't take a road trip because it's very dangerous. So I don't think, yes, although we have resolved some part of the security problem, it has necessitated that hundreds and thousands of students have returned to school. I don't think it's that obvious. The second thing is that there are cultural dynamics, and that's why you would see, if you take a ruler and you divide Nigeria into north-south, you see the dynamics, the difference. You see that the southern part of Nigeria, by culture, by history, by tradition, by religion, seems to be better educated. The data tells us that. The northern part of Nigeria is not as educated as the southern part of Nigeria. I'm speaking solely on data.
That's factual.
If you then also divide that into girls' education and boys' education, it shows a stark figure. So it tells us that the northern Nigeria are not educating their girls enough. The numbers in southern Nigeria is better. We are not doing the absolute best. If you still look at this disparity between boys and girls, but in the northern part of Nigeria, the disparities are much higher, and girls are falling out of school faster. So if you look at data and you say primary 6 to JSS1, and you look at people who drop out of school, girls are falling faster out of school than boys. Issues affecting it, issues like child marriage. Girls in many parts of Nigeria, 14, 15, 16, are getting married, so they drop out of school to get married because they believe, what's the essence of your education if you're going to go get married? You don't need formal education. You need to learn how to take care of your home, learn how to cook, learn how to be a helpful hand at the farm and stuff like that. So girls are getting married younger, and if parents have scarce resources and they know this girl is going to be married off to another family, they don't necessarily want to use their scarce resources to invest in training her for education when they feel that there is no benefit from it.
So they're prioritized out of the educational system.
Exactly.
That's very interesting. And which then brings me to another question about the opposite gender, which is in the South, which is the boys, in terms of dropping out. But that's another angle of the conversation, and we'll continue with that right after this very short break. Stay with me. Welcome back to The Big Issue. My name is Buchi, and I have been in the studio with Rotimi Olawale. Rotimi is the founder and executive director of Youth Hub Africa. We've been having a conversation on the out-of-school children in Nigeria, and we've traced this entire conversation from questioning the data that we got, comparing the federal government's data with UNESCO's data, and looking at some of the causative factors that have brought us here. You know, looked at security, looked at poverty, looked at cultural reasons. And it brings me to another aspect, which is dropping out of school. But I'm not just talking about dropping out of school in terms of the parents pulling the 6, 7-year-old out of school, basically saying, I can afford the uniform, I can afford the school fees to take you to school. I'm talking about the 13-year-old, the 14-year-old, the 15, 16, 17-year-old, which is where deposits us firmly into the realm of the UNESCO data, right? In the North, as you've already said, in parts of the North, you can see where You can understand the why in terms of some people, especially girls, have been pushed into early marriage, or they're prioritized out of getting an education, in favor of the boys. How about in the South, where you've got boys dropping out of school as well? What do you think are the reasons that you've seen?
Well, I think there are a number of things to look at. First, one of the reasons why older kids drop out of school is the higher you climb in the education ladder in Nigeria, the higher you have to cough out. So as you're approaching doing your SS3, you have to do JAM, UTME, WAHEC, NECO, and these things are not cheap. They come at a cost. That's one aspect of it. In my alma mater, the secondary school that I finished from in Osun State, just this year, the alumni in my set had to contribute money to pay for WAEC fees of, I think, about a dozen students who otherwise would not have been able to sit for WAEC because they simply cannot afford it. So that's one aspect. They have to cough out more money. Second thing is that what is free in Nigeria is basic education. UBE covers the first 9 years of schooling, 6 years in primary, the first JSS1 to JSS3. In most part of Nigeria, from SS1, it's not free. Although the fees are highly subsidized, so you see a jump in what parents have to cough out to pay for their wards than what they have been doing from primary 1 to JS3. That's the second factor. When you talk about specific areas where boys are dropping out faster than girls, you find out in southeastern part of Nigeria the most. And this is also as a result of economic factor, because people have to take a decision. Should our boys remain in school? Should they go and learn a trade and start to go into the business line and make money? If people are making a bet on education and saying, would education lead me to financial prosperity or financial comfortability, or will learning a trade lead me there? People are making a bet that learning a trade guarantees, and I don't blame them. We have lots of graduates in Nigeria who have no jobs. Youth unemployment in Nigeria is crazily high. Unemployment figures, although government has done abracadabra on it recently, and it has suddenly nosedived and dropped. But the real truth is that unemployment in Nigeria is very high. I think it's currently at 4.9% by official figures.
4.1%.
4.1% by original figures. But if you now look at underemployment, it shows you the stark realities. And then you now look at today's current dynamics. Subsidy is removed. Transport has become expensive. Food has become expensive. I was looking at social media the other day. Someone was saying in our workplace we have about a dozen or a dozen and a half low-level workers, cleaners, security people, that only about 1 or 2 used to sleep in the office in the past. But these days, all but one sleep in the office during the week. They can only afford to go home at weekend, because if they go back and forth every day,
the salary is gone on
the salary
transportation.
cannot even sustain them on transportation alone, and they have families and children. So these are the dynamics. So people drop out. The other thing is also the carrying capacity of Nigerian universities is very small. I think right now with all the universities we have, 500,000 admission slots available. That's it. Between 500 to 600,000 admission slots.
On an annual basis?
On an annual basis. Yeah. Those are the slots available. We have between 1 to 1.1 million people writing JAM every year. So if all of them pass, they can get into school. They can't get into school. We don't have it. So, and I recall the argument of the University Vice Chancellor of Ife several years ago when President Goodluck Jonathan wanted to create more universities. He says, if you give me the amount that has been voted to start new universities, I think at the time, 2 billion per each of the new universities, I'm not very sure. If you give that to me, Ife, with the 2 billion, I will double my current capacity from 20,000 students to 40,000 students. Whereas if you use it to establish a new university, first year, 3,000 students if you're lucky.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky, because they have to recruit teachers, teaching staff, non-teaching staff, build buildings. Ife already has buildings.
And that money, first and foremost, will go for infrastructure.
Yeah, infrastructure, recruitment, all kinds of things, that. So if you give me that money, but the politics at the time was in favor of establishing more universities. I don't know. Nigeria is obsessed with universities, establishing more universities. My state has 2 state-run universities, and I'm wondering, in the pecking order of federal location, we're number 34 out of 36, and we have 2 state universities. If I say anything further, they will lynch me by state, so I refuse to comment on things like that. But there's an obsession with universities in Nigeria. But all these universities, if you look at especially private universities, 4,000 students, 6,000 students, 7,000 students, 3,000 students, that's it. State universities, 10,000, 15,000 students. Federal universities, maximum 20, 25. I doubt there's any university in Nigeria doing 50,000 students. From all the data I've seen, it's not. But it's easier to increase those who are 15, 20K students to double that capacity than to establish new universities. And so if there is no carrying capacity, so look at it. When you finish SS3, you have to write JAM. If you fail, you have to rewrite. It's costing you money. And if you can't afford it, and these days, many state universities and federal universities are also increasing costs because there's a movement in Nigeria now where people believe it's a capitalist economy. University education is not cheap. It shouldn't be free. People should cough out the pennies. I agree to some of the sentiment, but I always say to people, the vulnerable and the poor, how would they go to school?
Who takes care of them?
Who takes care of them? We need to protect them. We need to find social safety nets that ensures that you're a bright student, you're an average student from a poor family, university education is still within your grasp. We have seen conversations around this student loan bill. I think we're just beginning to scratch the surface. More work still needs to be done on that, but we need to find better avenues to ensure that we protect the vulnerable in our midst to get into school.
Thank you for that. Let me sort of, not really circling, just to walk back a bit to something you had said in terms of dropping out, especially like you said, the Southeast. If you're dropping out to learn a trade, if we do have trade schools, then you wouldn't actually be dropping out of school, would you? You would actually still be in school. You'd just be learning a trade as opposed to chasing the academic route and trying to get into the university or the polytechnic and all of that. Which then leads me to an obvious question, really. But then most things about Nigerian governance can look obvious, but then not maybe to all of us, but not to those who are responsible. Why aren't we also looking at that as one of the solutions to sort of getting kids, well, understanding that kids will leave school? I know people when I went to school who I knew from the time we were in JSS3 that this guy has no business in the university. But I knew that if he learned a trade early, he'd do well, right? But so why isn't this something that we're looking at in detail?
I mean, again, when you look at Nigeria is a very curious case. Many of these things already exist. We have federal technical colleges, which you can go from secondary school, perhaps even from SS1, to go and learn vocational education. We have the whole technical vocational education sector, or TVET, where you can go into vocational education. But that's it. Perception is very strong. If people go there and they can't bring anything tangible out, nobody wants to send their kids there. So if people go to polytechnics and the degrees are not respected by government or the private sector, who wants to go and waste time in polytechnics, right? Even when they go to polytechnics, everybody's still trying to find their way back into universities, because the perception across board in Nigeria is that university education is number one. Polytechnics and colleges of education is ranked much lower. But we need them. Today in Nigeria, if you want to hire someone to do your plumbing, it's poor. How are plumbers trained in Nigeria? If there are 10,000 plumbers in Nigeria, 9,000 of them are trained because they were apprenticed to a plumber who has years of experience, who was also an apprentice to someone else. So the quality and standard of training over the years has declined.
So if you apprentice to someone who has no idea what he's doing, then you learn that, and then when
people also attach to you with their apprentice and they learn that. So that's it. Mechanics, same thing. There is no state government in Nigeria that has a mechanical institute. None. Zero. But we're investing in universities. There's none that has a plumbing institute that you say, you know what, if you come to our institute after 2 years, anywhere you show up with your certificate and they give you a plumbing work, your brain can figure out what's the problem here. How can I solve it? How can I make it work? If you hire Nigerian trained tilers, hey, they're in tiles for you. People are bringing tilers from our neighboring countries, from Cotonou, from Togo, from all the places to come and tile in Nigeria because we don't have them. So if you want to create a blue collar economy, right? People are dropping out of school. That's the kind of things that we should funnel them into. A few years, 5 years, if I know that I show up at Dangote, whatever, as a blue collared worker, they interview me, the chance and give 10 of us jobs. 4 of us finished from vocational institute in Imo State, and we were the best in our set. What do you think the HR firm in Dangote will start doing? Start watching out from people that finish from that school.
That's cool.
It's the same
Or
thing.
even go recruit from the school
Or
directly.
recruit directly. It's the same thing with the tech sector. If you look at those in the tech sector in Nigeria today, majority are coming from certain universities. University of Ife, University of Lagos, FUTA, LAUTECH. If you look at the data, most of the founders are coming, minus those who are coming from outside of Nigeria who've gone to University of Nigeria. They are coming from that. So University of Ife, and that's, you will know, over time from the 90s, Ife has had a very strong computer science culture, really like close to industry, so they have that. So people are recruiting strongly from these universities. So it's the same. If I sit in my office and I suddenly discover I want to hire plumbers or mechanics, and the first person comes is from XYZ Vocational Institute, I chance and hire you, and boom, you're my star performer. Next year I did another set of recruitment. I hire 2 people from your institution, boom. It's rocket science, not rocket science. I want to recruit more people from that school. Simple, that's what it means. So if we're not making such investment, we're joking with our educational sector. And that's what we continue to see in Nigeria.
So you've already got into, solutions and what the way forward is. And I like that, because irrespective of which numbers or which whatever aisle of the data you fall on, if you accept UNESCO's numbers, 20 million, that's really alarming. But even if you say, okay, no, let's look at only ages 6 to 11 and then also believe the government on 6.9 million. Well, it's not comforting either, because that's like double the population of a country like, say, Namibia, right? So imagine a country like Namibia,
5 times the population of the Gambia.
Exactly. So what exactly is the way forward? One of them, obviously, sort of, being deliberate about interventions and investment in technical colleges, right? So even if you're leaving school, leaving the actual secondary schools, the ones we call actual ones, to go learn a trade, well, you are still within an educational system, even if it might be seen as semi-formal. What other solutions are there? What are the other ways forward?
I think the first thing is that if you don't get basic education right, primary school is so important. That's where you build the foundations. If you don't get it right, it's very difficult to build anything on it, right? If you don't learn addition and subtraction, multiplication, division, if you don't learn proper tenses in pronoun, noun, verb, adverb, if you don't learn them in primary school, it's very difficult to put anything on it, because these are the foundation. You don't know numeracy, literacy, you have no such skills. Very difficult to build anything on it. That's why many parents invest heavily for their kids to go to private primary school to gain the foundation. If they don't have the resources, they withdraw them to public school. They do extramural classes, patch them here and there. There's a high chance of them that they will get into university and be fine. I always say in Nigeria today, as we were today, if your ward attends public primary school, starts from year 1, primary 1, finishes up until SS3, and public primary school, public secondary school outside of state capitals, and it gains admission to university, it's a miracle. It's a big miracle. So first, for me, invest in basic education. We have several models, we've seen several ways where we don't need fancy classrooms. Our parents went into schools. My mom, when she was talking about how she learned, she had no shoes. She literally went to finish primary school without wearing shoes. But they learned.
The real I had no shoes generation.
The real had no shoes generation. But they learned. She finished, did university degree, did a master, did school of nursing, did many things, right? Built many things on that. So we don't need, I'm not saying we should not provide standard infrastructure, but people can learn with or without standardized international infrastructure, or whatever you want to call it. People can learn. So if you build the foundation, counting, kids can learn to count. Many kids finish primary 6, they can't write their names. How? So investment has gone down the drain, because it costs government a lot to keep education free, whether we like it or not. They pay the teachers. They maintain the infrastructure in schools. They do supplies. Now, in some states, they're doing feeding. It costs. Actually, government should calculate how much it costs them per child to keep a child in school. Probably it's costing government 50,000 naira per child in some states to keep a child in school. So if after 6 years, 300,000 naira investment, the child cannot even write their name, it's investment down the drain.
It's a waste of money.
It's a waste of money. So we need to do better to get in better, more outcomes out of each naira we invest in education at the basic level. If you have solid education at basic level, even if they finish out at primary 6, it means if you hire them to be your storekeeper, they can write.
At the very
your
least.
customers.
They can do bookkeeping.
Simple bookkeeping, they can keep a record for you. Then they are useful to the society. But if they can't do that, they will end up as nannies and they will be paid very little because even as nannies, they can't even do a market list for you. They can't. So the only thing they can do is sweep your house and ensure somebody is home. If somebody knocks the door, they open the door. That's it.
And then because you have to employ other people for other purposes, you have to split that money.
Exactly. There cannot be a house manager who can say, okay, I'll keep this house functioning and running in the absence of my employer. So,
and get paid well
and get paid well for it. So we need to train them, bake them very well. At the end of primary 6 years, they should be sound. If they are sound, then it's very easy to build a lot of things. I believe all Nigerians can go to university. I don't think it's necessary as a policy to try to force every Nigerian to university. Some want to do business. Some want to go into vocational education. Excuse me, furniture making is very profitable in Nigeria these days. We have people who have set up tech firms. What they do is actually producing furniture, positioning it as a tech firm, and distributing across the nation. So there are many profitable things. What government needs to realize is that the end goal of Nigerians is not to get an education. The end goal of every Nigerian is to be comfortable, right? To finish whatever it is that we have learned, be able to get value for money, be able to buy a car, build a house, raise a family. So how the means to get into that is not the rat race, I must get a degree. Now every Nigerian feels degree is not enough. I want to do masters. So when they finish the first degree, they want to do masters. It's not enough, right? What you need to do is to funnel people into ways and show that they can make money. In many countries abroad, in the US, for instance, in Singapore, for instance, they do data. They will tell you, right now we are short of computer scientists. In next 20 years, we'll be short by 20,000 computer scientists. So what do they start doing now? All of a sudden, you start seeing fabulous scholarships offer. The dangling offers, 100% tuition free. We pay all your tuition. What does that mean? All of a sudden, a lot of people are getting interested in computer science. They don't wait for the next 20 years. If you ask Nigeria, how many doctors do we need? Do we know? How many engineers do we need? Do we know? Dangote is building a refinery. We're repairing the refinery. How many petroleum engineers would we need in the next 10 years? Do we know? How are we building people from now to fill those spots in the future? What are we dangling? How many teachers do we need? They say by year 2050, we'll be the third, fourth largest nation in the world by population. What does that mean? How many additional classrooms would we need? How many teachers do we need? How many science teachers are we short? Do we have a shortfall? In which states do we have those shortfalls? So that when we're accrediting universities in those states, we're insisting with those states, you need to start this kind of degrees because in the next 5 years, you'll be short of these kinds of things. And as federal government, we're incentivizing you to do that. So, okay, if you do this, we'll give you this grant in order to set it up this way. Those are the kinds of policy making that we need to do in Nigeria to see results. Vocational institutes. If you go to Germany, vocational institutes are very popular. People don't need to have a degree. They finish high school, they do learn a trade, go to a vocational institute, they're fine. They do repairs for you, there are more than 200 million mobile phones in Nigeria. Where's the #1 institute to learn how to do phone repairs in Nigeria? Doesn't exist.
You learn the same way you learn. You learn the same way you learn the trade. You attach yourself to someone, you make the errors, and hopefully you learn it.
But as government, we can insist and partner with the phone makers, right? When I wanted to repair, I have a Canon camera. My office is a Canon camera. There's no Canon authorized repairer in Nigeria. There's one in South Africa.
But there are a lot of users of Canon cameras.
Many of them.
This show has been filmed on a Canon camera.
Many of them. There's no Canon authorized. I went to Canon website, searched, it's in South Africa. So I said I DHL the equipment to South Africa. Luckily for me, I was traveling to Denmark the next month. I took it to Denmark, searched, found the Canon authorized repairer, took it there. The guys rolled up, they're still wearing jeans. Fafa asked me to drop it, fixed it, went back and picked it up. We can do those things. And we have people who are very good with their hands, who have the brains, who can piece apart. We just need to standardize it so that, and then get them accredited by the manufacturer, so that you know the real from the fake. So if I go to Canon website, they'll tell me there's 5 in Abuja, there's 50 in Lagos because there's a big market in Lagos, there's 10 in Aba. So if I land in Aba and everybody rush me, I know who I'm looking for. I have his phone number, I have his email address, I can reach them. We need to do many of such, and we have too many thousands of such things that we can do in Nigeria, where our people will earn decent income, and they don't need to go to the four walls of a university. They go there, the polytechnics is accredited with these institutions, so when they go there, they are learning how to do Canon, and Canon has too many products: printers, photocopiers, cameras, many things, Sony, TVs, blah, blah, blah. We have a few TV repairers now in Nigeria, but they're not enough. We need to more of this so that people can go earn a living. That's the biggest thing that people want: earn a living, live comfortably in Nigeria. If you don't do that, we will continue to have a generation of Nigerians who want to leave Nigeria and never come back.
Okay, thank you very much, Rotimi. I want to bring us back to something, getting kids into the classroom in the first place, because I absolutely agree with all your points about being properly baked, the quality of your education, in what aspects, in what forums. I do want to actually engage on ways to ensure that these kids actually do get back into the classroom. But before we do that, let's take a very quick break. You've been watching The Big Issue. I've been in the studio with Rotimi Olawole. He's the founder and executive director of Youth Hub Africa. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Big Issue. Rotimi and I have been having a conversation on Nigeria's out-of-school children, and we've both traced the numbers, questioned some of it, looked at the causative factors, looked at the issues around it, context, both cultural, financial, all of that. And we've started to explore ways out of the quagmire that we find ourselves in. And we've talked about sort of, baking the graduates better, focusing on infrastructure, basically all of that. But I want us, Rotimi, to talk about ways in which we can actually attract the students or the pupils into the classrooms in the first place. And one of the ways that the government say that they've done any work in, aside the obvious security and all of that, is the school feeding program. And globally, it's not something that you can argue against. If you have free food in schools, pupils will get into school to eat. My organization, Narrative 4, has a project in Joslovo in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, where kids will always come to that community center because they're promised a hot meal. We don't have to go looking for them to come learn the things they want to learn. The fact that there's a hot meal means that they're going to be there. So that's one way that you can get people into the school, irrespective of the quality of the school. Half-baked education is better than no education, right? What are other social ways that we can attract people to school, whether it's attracting the kid themselves or making it attractive for their parents to send their kid to the school?
There are a number of things that we can do. One is to run social programs on radio and TV that inherently promotes the value of an education, because some of the cultural and traditional, perhaps also religious issue takes a long while to change. You need behavioral change. Behavioral change will not happen overnight. You can decree, hey, stop marrying your girls young. It doesn't work like that. So you need over time. And Nigerian likes entertainment. We need to partner with Nollywood, do radio drama. These kind of things would, one way or the other, encourage people to look in the direction of school. Second thing is, school should also be a place where interesting and exciting things happen. Many parts of Nigeria now, we've forgotten about school sports. Some people want to play sports, and if they have the opportunity to play sports within the four walls of the school, they will go to school. Understandable. So sports should be part of recreation, exciting things, inter-house sports should happen within the school walls that would drive people want to be part of it. So if I join the school, I can make it into the school soccer team and we can go and play in another town, another city, then there's a strong desire that I want to play. So how do we use that to feed into our national teams, sports festival and things? We need to find such things go into the school. Beyond that, we need to change the way we educate within the four walls of school. The Nigerian school system is a garbage in, garbage out education where you go to school, you give in text, you copy what's on the board, you write it down, cram as much as possible, give it to me in the exam the same way I've taught you in class, and you pass. Don't play anything funny with don't remix what I have given you. You should remix, and me, I don't know what you're talking about, you will not pass. School should be where we build the inquisitiveness of the children. Let them explore, let them do things, let them push the envelope. That's where exciting things should happen. Let them do science projects, let them do interesting things in school. The next thing is also conditional cash transfers for especially poverty-prone areas. How do you
was this not one of the conditions for remaining a beneficiary, that you will enroll your children of school attending age in schools?
For the social register?
Yeah.
It's part of it, but we need to strengthen that a little bit more to say if you want to be a beneficiary, then you have to release because those things are powerful. This model has been used. First, I think it was used in Brazil,
yes.
And then used in many places. It works because people have a big incentive then to either go to an health center or to send their kids to school, and so that also works. So there's a mixed match of things that we can deploy that makes it work. Also, a huge library. I don't know, for me, library is a big thing for me. My dad used to have a good collection of books. My school library used to have a decent collection of books. The public library in my city, I don't know what it is now. I know because the public library is based inside the local government, and if we go there, I know that there are different newspapers of the day, sometimes a day or two old. I can look and read in the newspaper. I'd like to look at the cartoon section when I was young. I look at this. So those are the kinds of things that excite children. If you create such an environment, then different and use targeting. And that's where data comes in. That's why we need to find appropriate data broken down to the smallest unit. If you know for this local government, boys are the ones not coming to school, you apply a different lens. If you know for this local government, they have a girls' education problem, you apply a different lens. If you know for this local government, they are not even coming to school at all, boys or girls, or they don't show up, you apply a different model. We need to work also, use a multi-sectoral approach, work with our religious leaders, work with our traditional leaders, get them involved in ensuring that people come to school, do campaigns and stuff, work with our entertainment and creative sector. We need exciting things to happen to school. These ones, where the best students are sent to science class, we need to stop that kind of rubbish, right? We need to have well-trained guidance counselors in schools. People are interested in art, allow them to explore. People are interested in different fields, allow them to explore. When we create that kind of environment, more people are attracted to school. Most importantly, we need to eliminate hidden fees. If hidden fees remain, people can afford it, they won't show up in school. If we eliminate hidden fees, many more people would come into the classroom and want to learn.
All right, thank you very much, Rotimi. I think what is important for me, or the biggest takeaway that I've taken from this second part of your pointer is it's about making school interesting for kids. And for me, I think what that speaks to is that it's not just about bringing these kids into the school system, it's also having them stay there, isn't it? Because one aspect of this out of school children conversation that we're not having as much as we probably should be having is the rate of dropping out of school. Because when people drop out of schools, then they're no longer in school, which means obviously they're part of the out of school children. So we have to ensure that the system tries to keep school students in or pupils in rather than out. And this is actually a very perfect place to draw the curtain on today's show. I'm very grateful to you, Rotimi, for coming in and for the insight that you shared today. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here, and I look forward to more editions.
Thank you very much. Rotimi is the founder and executive director of Youth Hub Africa. You've been watching The Big Issue right here on Mswitch. You can catch all of our other shows on different aspects of governance, policy, basically around everything that affects you, across the 36 states of the Federation and on the FCT. You can catch all of our content on YouTube, on Google, on Spotify podcasts. My name is Buchi Onyebule, and I'm very glad to have hosted you for today. See you next time.